Making headlines for this week of November the 14th. Breaking the bank. Whistleblower risks all at the 11th hour to prevent information and crime from being covered up. Currency events. Canada and China bypass the US dollar and Russia floats the ruble ahead of expected demise of American dollar. Singing comet. Probe lands on comet. Speculation grows behind an alleged secret purpose of the 12-year Rosetta mission. And tackling online security. Mozilla and Tor team up to help provide users with greater online security and anonymity.
With news around, upon, within, and beyond our planet, the program making disclosure official. This is Cosmic Vision News. Here is Jeffrey West.
Greetings and blessings to all. A financial story is again leading the newscast this week. Some major news is shaking the financial world with the revelation that there is a whistleblower who may, quite literally, be breaking the bank, the J.P. Morgan Bank in particular. The story first came out by Matt Taibbi at the RollingStone.com website. Taibbi tells the story of Elaine Fleischman, an attorney who tried to stay quiet according to her non-disclosure agreement, but her passion for human rights began to shine through, especially at the 11th hour, and she could no longer stay silent. Taibbi writes in his article from November 6th that Fleischman is the central witness in one of the biggest cases of white-collar crime in American history, possessing secrets that J.P. Morgan Chase CEO Jamie Dimon late last year paid $9 billion to keep the public from hearing. Back in 2006, as a deal manager at the gigantic bank, Fleischman first witnessed, then tried to stop what she describes as massive criminal securities fraud in the bank's mortgage operations. Thanks to a confidentiality agreement, she's kept her mouth shut since then. According to her, my closest family and friends don't know what I've been living with, she says. Even my brother will only find out for the first time when he sees this interview. 6 years after the crisis that cratered the global economy, it's not exactly news that the country's biggest banks stole on a grand scale. That's why the more important part of Fleischman's story is in the pains Chase and the Justice Department took to silence her. This past year, she watched as Holder's Justice Department struck a series of historic settlement deals with Chase, Citigroup, and Bank of America. The root bargain in these deals was cash for secrecy. The banks paid big fines without trials or even judges, only secret negotiations that typically ended with the public shown nothing but vague, quasi-official papers called statements of facts, which were conveniently devoid of anything like actual facts. And now, with Holder about to leave office and his Justice Department reportedly wrapping up its final settlements, the state is effectively putting the finishing touches on what will amount to a sweeping industry-wide effort to bury the facts of a whole generation of Wall Street corruption. I could be sued into bankruptcy, she says. I could lose my license to practice law. I could lose everything. But if we don't start speaking up, then this really is all we're going to get, the biggest financial cover-up in history. It was becoming a case of speak now or forever hold your peace, and Fleischman made the decision that it was now or never. Fleischman recently made an appearance on the Kaiser Report with Max Kaiser. Here are some selected excerpts she shares with Kaiser about those events.
Welcome back to the Kaiser Report. I'm Max Kaiser. Time now to turn to Elaine Fleischman, the J.P. Morgan whistleblower profiled in the latest edition of the Rolling Stone. All right, now, Elaine, tell us exactly specifically what your job was and what was the thing that got you to blow the whistle.
It started out, everything seemed normal, and then a new diligence supervisor came in who immediately when he came in, suddenly a lot of information started getting blocked off. And he had this policy of no emails. He wouldn't send emails, and we weren't allowed to send him emails. If you tried to do it, he would actually come out and yell at you and tell you not to send them. Things were already a little bit strange, and then in particular in October 2006, we had this pool come in of loans, which, back then we were buying loans from Countrywide and all those originators that everyone knows about so well now. And our job was then to take those, make sure they were good enough to sell to investors, and then pass them along. So we had this pool come in, which normally they go back maybe 2-3 months. They went back, 7-8 months. And when you know the industry, you know that if something's that old, it's because they tried to sell it and no one else would buy it. Or worse yet, they've actually sold it and somebody bought it and then turned around and went, look, this has missed too many payments, we're selling it right back to you.
This goes going back 4, 5, 6 years now, where what's known as the subprime crisis or the mortgage crisis, where banks like J.P. Morgan were packaging toxic securities, and by all observers, they were doing so knowingly, that they were knowingly scraping the barrel and selling these toxic securities. And I understand you were just on another news outlet with Steve Miller, the current chairman of AIG, who claims, as does Jamie Dimon, that they were too stupid to know the difference between right and wrong. Do you buy that?
Well, the thing that I find absolutely amazing is how these people who are taking millions of dollars per year because they supposedly have all this incredible knowledge can then turn around and say they fundamentally didn't understand the products they were selling, how the housing market works, that it even goes up. And with all these internal warnings, they just didn't understand the internal warnings. It's amazing to watch.
Isn't it the rapist blaming the victim? Jamie Dimon has the moral equivalency of a rapist. Why is he allowed to continue doing the job that he's doing? And why are you the only person in America willing to stand up to defend those who are being victimized by him?
Well, and one of the fundamental things that I've seen all over the media that if you work in the industry, it's just not true at all and completely backwards is this idea that somehow you don't have any obligations to sophisticated investors. It just doesn't make any sense. These securities are only sold to sophisticated investors. So if the laws don't apply to sophisticated investors, who are they for? The other thing, too, is, they say sophisticated investors, but these are pension funds, they're 401ks, they're retirement plans, and everyone in the industry selling these knows that. And basically what you're doing when you're doing these, when you're J.P. Morgan, is you're actually putting these together, putting a big stamp on the front of this document that says, we've looked at these are good quality, and we've told you everything about them. So basically it was, trust us, and then afterwards, oh no, it's your fault for trusting us.
But we have some perjury going on here. Are they going to go after him, or are they just going to let this fly like they do apparently on everything else?
Well, I mean, the amazing thing in the article that sort of quote and information comes from is that it also says that, so basically what happened is the servicers, because remember, J.P. Morgan takes payments on these loans, so they just know from their processes if people aren't paying. So when they had a meeting, one of these guys who does this came in and said, well, these loans aren't paying properly. People are having trouble paying. So Jamie Dimon makes that, famous phone call about unloading all this stuff. And in the end of 2006, J.P. Morgan actually unloaded $12 billion worth of their own originated products. These aren't even loans they bought from other people. These are loans that they originated themselves. And that's part of the reason why, they did so well, is they got rid of their own product.
And it reminds me, of course, of Goldman Sachs was doing the same type of thing, packaging garbage, selling it to their own customers, and then repackaging and making bets against customers who had bought the stuff that they had just sold them. What kind of window is available to go after these fraudsters? Is this where we're going to finally take down this financial terrorist, Jamie Dimon?
Part of the reason why I'm coming forward now at this time is it's not just J.P. Morgan. Basically, you've got your securities fraud, which the statute of limitations had almost completely run by the time they even started investigating. And those are really easy cases that are gone now. The wire fraud, when it's wire fraud affecting a financial institution, you have 10 years. So it actually applies to any one of these cases that you can have this 10 years. And, the financial institutions, lots of these certificates were sold to, community banks, credit unions, and that's without even counting the fact that J.P. Morgan itself is, and Citibank and all of these are financial institutions. So part of my concern was that, we've already let one statute of limitations run, and we're getting really close now on even the 10-year ones. And after that, it's done. There's no chance of getting any justice on this.
So how can we help press the banks, particularly Jamie Dimon, on this wire fraud charge? But can we crowdfund some kind of legal fund to put it together as a last gasp effort by the American people to save themselves from one of the worst financial, acts of brazen theft in history of America. Can we do something? Maybe get some funds together to put something. What do you think?
Well, look, I really think the only reason we got the task force in the first place is because a whole bunch of people came out, Occupy, journalists like Matt, and just wouldn't let it go until they had to do something. So it's a question of doing that again, having the media pick it up, having people just push on it, writing to your representatives and saying this is something we care about and we need to know what you're doing on this.
So let's talk about your next steps, because basically you've blown the whistle. You've stated that you believe that this is kind of a career burner. What's your go forward? Edward Snowden, a whistleblower, is now living in Russia. How far are you prepared to take this?
My thing was basically just come out, talk to people, make it through the next few days, and I had no plan after that because we just had no idea how it was going to go. So what's happened has been completely amazing and just unexpected.
CVN is attempting to reach out to Fleischman in the hopes that she may be willing to share some more higher vibration insights about why all this may be unfolding at this time. Fleischman's whistleblowing testimony follows not too long after other Wall Street and banking revelations that came from Carmen Segarra. An article appearing on the thisamericanlife.org website from September 26th, the website offers what it called an unprecedented look inside one of the most powerful secretive institutions in the country. The New York Federal Reserve is supposed to monitor big banks, but when Carmen Segarra was hired, what she witnessed inside the Fed was so alarming that she got a tiny recorder and secretly started taping. Segarra, a bank examiner for the Federal Reserve in New York, who, in 2012, started secretly recording as she and her colleagues went about regulating one of the most powerful financial institutions in the country. This was during a time when the New York Fed was trying to become a stronger regulator so that it wouldn't fail to miss another financial crisis like it did with the meltdown in 2008. As part of that effort to reform, the Fed had commissioned a highly confidential report written by Columbia professor David Beim that identified why the regulator failed in the years leading up to the crisis. Beim laid out specific recommendations for how the Fed could fix its problems. Carmen's recordings allowed the world to see if the Fed had successfully heeded those recommendations more than 2 years later, and apparently the recordings confirm that very little, if any, of those recommendations were actually followed. It is perhaps worth noting also that it is the energies of the divine feminine that are rising up to serve in higher service to humanity at this time. With the examples of Fleischman and Segarra, perhaps others will feel called to come forth at this time with even more information that will help speed up the process of transformation that is unfolding at this time. In geopolitical news, after several days in which a few global leaders were meeting with Chinese officials in China, perhaps to finalize some deals on the new global financial paradigm, they are now moving on to attend the G20 Leaders Summit being held in Brisbane, Australia from the 15th to the 16th of November. What may be taking place behind the scenes is anyone's guess at this time. Dealing specifically with news about the BRICS countries, an article on thebricspost.com on November 14th writes that BRICS leaders have arrived in Brisbane to participate in discussions on boosting global trade during the annual G20 Leaders Summit. The 5 leaders will also attend a BRICS meeting on the sidelines where they will discuss individual ratification of the newly formed $100 billion BRICS Bank and the $100 billion Contingency Reserve Arrangement by lawmakers in the 5 countries. On a more generic level, the article adds that this year's G20 priorities have been listed as strategies to stimulate growth and building global economic resilience. The Australian people, meanwhile, are probably more interested in watching their beleaguered leader try to uphold his alleged word that he was going to shirt front Vladimir Putin. Both Australia and Canada seem to share one thing in common at this time, and this appears to be the most embarrassing leaders on the global stage. Very little information has been released ahead of the event, although some have speculated that Putin may be facing a somewhat icy reception. One may argue, however, that if Putin does face an icy reception, it will not be because of actions Russia is alleged to have done to Ukraine and to a Malaysian jetliner, but rather more because he has done what may have been the greatest harm to the global banking cabal in beginning to shut this group down from their global influence and their enslavement of humanity and the planet for their profit, power, and greed. One could only imagine what may be going through the minds of leaders who are still firmly hanging on to the banking cabal and Zionist agendas. At some level, however, one must know that these leaders know exactly what is unfolding, and they are maintaining a global geopolitical strategy that is familiar and acceptable to the people of the world until such time as all the steps are put into place and each country and leader is on board with what needs to happen next. It is at times like these I sometimes wish that my influence as a journalist was far greater than what it currently is. I found myself reflecting earlier today what I might say to the leaders and what question I would ask if I could only ask one question. I would say and ask the following if I was there as an international journalist. To each of you sitting up there, I am trying first and foremost to see each of you, first as human beings, then as citizens of this planet that sustains us, then as citizens of various nations around this planet, and I see you last as leaders. I thank you for your service and for your actions that are now awakening people all over the world to engage in global change. We are spiritual beings having a human experience. Many of you have placed yourselves in positions of being above those you govern, and you wonder why people are rebelling and resisting. Meanwhile, there are leaders like Jose Mujica from Uruguay who walk their talk and lead by example. He has no reason to fear anything because he has nothing that is of interest to anyone. On the other hand, each of you up there do have things of interest, and this is why you spend millions of dollars paying for security services to protect that which you are claiming from the people who elected you. You try to justify this spending, but at the end of the day, you really can't. If I was to speculate, here is why I feel you think you need protection from the people. 1, you have not told the people the truth about the fractional reserve system of fiat currency and how its structures enslave people to systems of debt and ultimately to systems of fear, while making a minority of people extremely wealthy. 2, you have not told people there is a commercial system of admiralty law at play in the world that seeks to make every free human being a corporate entity, while enslaving people to rules that were created without the consent of the people, and rules that further enslave humans to systems of control and fear. 3, you have kept hidden from the world technologies that could easily clean up and benefit humans and our planet, and you have done this because there are corporate and banking interests that have hijacked governments and the political processes of countries in order to generate profit at the expense of humanity and our planet. And 4, you have not revealed to the world the truth of the human existence, that we are not alone in the universe, and the civilizations beyond Earth have been interacting in both negative and positive ways upon humans and our planet. These negative family members have been seeking to further control and enslave humanity and our planet, while the positive family members have been trying to help awaken and empower humanity to act in free will to serve humanity and our planet. These cover-ups, in some cases outright lies, would understandably cause many of you to waste taxpayer money to protect yourselves when true leaders, by their very example, should not hide in closets when danger approaches, but serve and be held accountable to truth and integrity. Almost, if not all, problems currently facing our planet can be tied directly or indirectly to one of these issues, and my question is this: Is there any leader who is now willing to demonstrate that integrity at this time and address the 4 issues I have mentioned? How wonderful it would be for some journalist attending the G20 to hear this and actually have the courage to ask this question on my behalf. For now, we wait until next week to hear the news of what is being released publicly from the meetings, and then also wait to hear the alternative news of what may have taken place behind the scenes. Recently, a former president of Russia made a public appearance, speaking at a forum in Germany during events marking the 25th anniversary of the tearing down of the Berlin Wall. An article on RT.com on November 8th writes that Western policies toward Russia, championed by Washington, have led to the current crisis, and if the confrontation continues, Europe will be weakened and become irrelevant. This, according to former Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev. Speaking to a forum in Berlin amid the celebration of the 25th anniversary fall of the Berlin Wall, he called on Western leaders to de-escalate tensions and meet Russia halfway to mend the current rift. After the Cold War ended, the leaders of the Western world were intoxicated with euphoria of triumph, and they adopted anti-Russian policies that eventually led to the current crisis, said Gorbachev. Taking advantage of Russia's weakening and a lack of a counterweight, they claimed monopoly leadership and domination in the world, and they refused to heed the word of caution from many of those present here, he said. The events of the past months are consequences of short-sighted policies of seeking to impose one's will and fait accompli while ignoring the interests of one's partners. Gorbachev feels that Europe is the one suffering the most, and he was quoted as saying that instead of becoming a leader of change in a global world, Europe has turned into an arena of political upheaval, of competition for the spheres of influence, and finally of military conflict. The consequence, inevitably, is Europe's weakening at a time when other centers of power and influence are gaining momentum. If this continues, Europe will lose a strong voice in world affairs and gradually become irrelevant. The article notes that over the longer term, the system of European security must be reformed because the enlargement of NATO and the current EU common defense policy have failed to produce positive results, Gorbachev said. This would likely require an overhaul of the OSCE, which in its current format is not up to the task, while proposals to that effect have been voiced by policymakers in both the EU and in Russia, but they have been filed away in the archives. Had such a mechanism been created, the worst scenarios of the Ukrainian events could have been averted. Back in the middle of October, in another RT article, Gorbachev had indicated that Russia and Western leaders could find common language in shared challenges. In this case, could common language be considered the global banking cabal? Jan Oberg, in posting this story to his Transnational Foundation for Peace and Future Research Facebook page, made his own personal observation about Gorbachev in writing that he is larger, more humanist, and more visionary than any Western politician today. Together with Willy Brandt, he has done more for peace in Europe since 1945 than anyone. That you are alive today, to a large extent, is because of his wise policies while administering the demise of the Soviet Union and the Warsaw Pact. Listen carefully to what he, at the age of 83, has to say about the triumphalist Western exploitation of modern history's most significant opportunity for peace, how we squandered it, and why we are basically in a new Cold War situation. Is there one NATO leader who can match him intellectually and dialogue with such a towering figure? According to Oberg, the answer tragically is no, and thus we are becoming irrelevant to the rest of the world. CVN reminds listeners that regardless of what you may think is happening outwardly on the global scene, with the stories that are being reported in the mainstream media, it is important to not take those stories at face value. Do not take what I am offering at face value. Although I may not be able to yet tell you exactly what is happening. I can tell you what you may think is now happening on the global scene, a new Cold War or something else. I can tell you personally, I feel very secure and confident in saying that there is something else going on, and this will be revealed when the time is right. If you are one who is able to take some moments to sit quietly and reflect on all these events and ask yourself what is going on, if you are truly able to bring your mind to a state of being quiet long enough, I believe you will be able to receive the answer that is most meaningful for you about what is happening in the world. No one can determine this for you. It becomes only your choice about how you are seeing the world and what you choose to create for our collective future. Over to financial news now. Several developments this week are signaling a continuing shift in the geoeconomic paradigm. We heard at the beginning of the newscast the revelations being made in the banking industry by Elaine Fleischman. Arguably, one of the bigger developments is the movement forward by Bank of England Governor Mark Carney to put an end to bank bailouts through the use of taxpayer money. An article published on RT.com on November the 10th has written that new rules are being proposed that will force creditors, not taxpayers, to carry the losses of banks that are deemed too big to fail. The plans come after Western taxpayers were asked to pay trillions of dollars to bail out banks in the 2008 financial crisis. The new global rules will force creditors to bear banks' losses, ensuring that taxpayers' money should never be used again to bail out banks. The proposal was unveiled by Mark Carney, chairman of the Switzerland-based Financial Stability Board and governor of the Bank of England. The new rules would require big banks to hold much more money against losses, which Carney called a watershed moment, adding that the bailout by the taxpayers in 2008 and 2009 was, quote-unquote, totally unfair. Once implemented, these agreements will play important roles in enabling globally systemic banks to be resolved or wound down without recourse to public subsidy and without disruption to the wider financial system, said Carney in a statement. Although the step is a positive one, there is a downside to the story. The new rules require international consultations and are not expected to go into effect until 2019. Having said this, however, it may be worth keeping in mind that by mentioning a date further off in the future, it may be a way of keeping the financial markets calm while the current financial transition takes place. It is perhaps a strategy to create a pleasant surprise by announcing changes sooner rather than raising expectations, causing market stress, and then risk having it fall apart. Essentially, the new rules will put the biggest part of any banking losses on the bank's shareholders and the lenders to the banks or the bond holders. Secondary to this is that the banks may have to scrap dividends and cut back on bonuses. A question might be is to ask why bonuses to executives are not the first thing to be cut, since all losses are ultimately the responsibility of the bank's leadership. Earlier in October, as reported by Mark Williamson of the HeraldScotland.com website, Williamson noted that Carney made it clear he wanted to see no chance of a repeat of the problems that engulfed the sector in 2008, when Royal Bank of Scotland was left requiring massive bailouts from the government. Williamson quoted Carney speaking to an earlier event in London as saying that the Bank of England today is the friend of resilient banks, continuous markets, and good collateral, and we are the enemy of taxpayer bailouts, fragile markets, and financial instability. Fairness demands the end of a system that privatizes gains but socializes losses. And simple economics dictates that the UK state cannot stand behind a banking system that is already many times the size of the economy. Carney has been hinting at reforms of this nature since at least late February, when Shane Croucher, reporting for the International Business Times on February 24th, had reported Carney as saying that banks can no longer rely on massive taxpayer subsidies. The timing of the announcement of the new rules just ahead of the G20 summit in Brisbane may be significant, and the coming weeks may offer more insights and revelations as to what is unfolding within the geoeconomic paradigm. In what some may consider to be a surprising move, given its unbending support of the global Zionist agenda, Canada appears to be taking steps towards joining other international countries in abandoning the US dollar as the currency for international trade. The investmentwatchblog.com reported on November 9th that Canada and China have signed a reciprocal currency deal that's expected to dramatically boost exports. The hub will foster far easier trade between the Canadian dollar and the Chinese yuan, also known as the renminbi. It makes Canada the first country in the Americas to have a deal to trade in the renminbi. The signing of the deal was announced in Beijing by Premier Li Keqiang and Prime Minister Stephen Harper. It's a great boon for the Canadian business community, both importers and exporters, because they can now do business in China with the currency and not have to go through multiple financial exchange transactions. Stuart Beck, President and CEO of the Asia Pacific Foundation of Canada, told CBC News. The Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, or CBC News website, had reported that the deal was aimed at boosting trade. Although unclear at this time, one who is more familiar with what is going on in the world may wonder if there is a deeper meaning behind this deal. CBC News included this information in a report from Catherine Cullen on November the 9th.
Stephen Harper's government oversaw the signing of nearly $2.5 billion in trade agreements in just one day. And China has agreed to create a virtual currency trading hub, a way to make it easier for Canadian and Chinese companies to do business directly. Many Canadian businesses are excited.
So the rest of the world is here looking for opportunities to do business, and we're playing catch-up.
We have to be pounding at the door in China like every other country is doing.
Catherine Cullen, CBC News, Beijing.
Now, some experts say that currency hub could double or even triple trade between Canada and China. Here's how it works. Usually, Canadian companies conduct business with China using US dollars, and this makes transactions more complicated and expensive for both sides. The currency hub takes out the middleman, so to speak, allowing direct exchange between the Canadian dollar and the Chinese yuan.
Given the fact that Canada is so close geographically but also economically to the U.S. and its dollar, this move suggests a surprising shift. It further lends support to a global move away from the U.S. dollar, but on a more speculative note, it may also indicate that Western countries may be starting to surrender to a new global banking paradigm that is isolating the formerly powerful global banking cabal. While still on the topic of currency events, another possible indicator this week of the move away from the US dollar came from Russia, as President Vladimir Putin announced that the ruble, the Russian currency, will no longer be pegged to the US dollar or the euro. For some people, this may be seen as a move to protect the currency as both the dollar and the euro move further into decline. We have this report from RT.
Russia's central bank has allowed the ruble to live its own life, to float freely in more economic terms. It's been a bumpy ride for the Russian currency lately, dropping steadily since sanctions were installed and oil prices lower. But after Monday's news, the ruble saw its best day in weeks. Joining us in the now is Piotr Panov, Managing Director from Lakeshore International. Thanks for being with us. Explain to us why we're seeing this reaction. I'm not sure if we can call it positive yet. What's happening?
Good evening. The reaction is well expected. You may find several reasons for the ruble exchange rate dropping sharply over the course of the last several months. And those reasons will be fundamental. And you can mention, slowdown of Russian economy, the outflow of investment, sanctions, and most importantly, the drop in the oil prices. However, if you take a look at this more carefully, the oil prices stabilized around $80 2.83 for some time now, and the oil prices dropped about 30%, where the exchange rate was continued dropping. And over the course of the last week, the ruble weakened by 15%, and in the total by about 50%. So what's the reason? And the answer is, in a way, simple. It's the speculative forces in the market, and the Russian central bank was acting in every drop of the ruble by infusing of dollars, hard currency in the market. So speculants were expecting when the ruble was getting close to the buy currency corridor, they were expecting the infusion of dollars in the system and playing this now. So now, what Mr. Putin, President Putin said, that the exchange rate will be now free, and the Russian central bank will act only by its own will, and its infusion of currency in the market will be unpredictable. Therefore, for the speculants will be much more difficult to predict when central bank will move, and hopefully that will take off the speculative forces in the market. So the correction by about 3% in the ruble is pretty much the result of those announcements.
Why change the strategy now?
Well, the central bank announced the change of strategy several years ago, and it used to be the main objective of the central bank to keep the ruble in some kind of corridor. Now, as it was announced, as I said, the main objective of central bank is control of the of inflation. So one may argue that it's not the best moment. I think the moment is well thought through. The announcement was made in China. In addition to the announcement of, trade between Russia and China being done in rubles and Chinese national currency. And the moment is great because now, as I said before, the main objective is to take out the speculative forces. So it was planned a while ago, and now the timing is pretty good to cope with the further drop of the exchange rate. And the current exchange rate is supposed to support the Russian domestic demand and Russian domestic production, and be a natural barrier in the imports in the Russian market, support the national producer.
All right, Piotr Panov, Managing Director from Lakeshore International, with us in the Now Tonight from downtown Moscow. Thanks so much.
In the report, Panov mentioned the removal of quote-unquote speculative sources. The use of this term would appear to be a hint towards the global banking cabal that has been controlling markets and various banking rates, including currency rates worldwide. Market watchers may now be looking to see how many other countries will follow and also remove the peg linking their currencies to the USD or even the euro. In general news, on last week's newscast, I ended with a few final words about revolution and how different types of revolution and resistance can still support the overall goal of change. Physical or violent revolution is often the last resort, if nothing else works. If there are people informed and courageous to do so, they may feel called to conduct a form of revolution, as was recently witnessed in one county in the state of Illinois. This report comes from NBC5 and Phil Rogers.
Tonight, a man takes the law into his own hands and makes a citizen's arrest. They had the entire board of the Clark County Park District arrested.
NBC5 Investigates Phil Rogers is on the story, and he tells us it was all legal. Phil?
Think about this. More than once, you've probably been so frustrated with some politician you wish someone would just place him under arrest. This is the story of someone who didn't just arrest one person, but a whole park district board. It all unfolded in downstate Clark County. About 30 citizens furious that the local park district was not allowing them to air a litany of grievances at a board meeting as the law requires.
There's no public comment to this meeting, so this meeting has been adjourned and all of these public comments are required of everybody by law.
He's right. The Illinois Open Meetings Act specifically states that public comment is required by law. And in Clark County, John Kraft, a member of a local watchdog group, took it upon himself to place the entire Park District Board under arrest.
I'm asking that each one of you, aside from you, you're not a board member, submit yourself to custody until we get the sheriff department out here. Can you call them, please?
911, what is your emergency?
Yeah, my name is Kirk Allen. We need a deputy at the Mill Creek State Park for an arrest of the board members. We have a criminal act that's been committed. They've been notified of a civilian arrest issuance, and we need a deputy out here ASAP.
You're under arrest, sir.
The board attorney objected and, in fact, tried to tell board members they were free to go.
Man, that's not the statute, and I'm telling you, you're making a fool of yourself.
And when the sheriff finally arrived, he told the board the citizens who objected were absolutely right, and he enforced the arrest.
You have to let the public talk.
Pat McCraney with the Better Government Association calls it a cautionary tale for everyone in government.
They work for the public, and they know they work for the public. Sometimes they might not think about that too much when they're thinking about themselves in a lot of cases, but they work for the public, and they need to let the public have its say.
There is a lawsuit pending. The park board's attorney, Kate Yargis, denied comment citing that suit, but said, quote, there's clear precedent in Illinois for resolving these matters, and the board has followed it. By the way, discussion about the lawsuit is on the agenda for tomorrow night's meeting, where we are told there will be time for public comment. Live in the newsroom, Phil Rogers, NBC5.
Perhaps part of what made this action successful is the fact that in the U.S., the position of sheriff is an elected one. There may be some who would argue that a move like this might not be possible in a country like Canada. It just may have to be approached in a slightly different manner. As citizens, it becomes empowering to not only know the rules that have been made and that are enforced upon a community without the knowing consent of the citizens. It is even more empowering to see what citizens and communities can achieve together when they become informed and energized for creating positive change for all. Over to disclosure-related news now. From the European Space Agency, or the ESA, this week comes the announcement of a successful release and follow-up landing of a probe onto the surface of a comet. RT reported that the fantastic decade-long mission of the ESA's Rosetta robotic space probe chasing Comet 67P Churyumov-Gerasimenko reached its final goal on Wednesday as the Philae robotic lander detached from its mothership and landed on the target. We definitely confirm that the lander is on the surface, said Flight Director Andrea Accomazo. The article goes on to add that the lander will study the comet's surface, while scientists are keen on finding out if it contains any organic amino acids. This could yield vital clues about the beginning of our solar system and the origin of life on Earth. Comets are icy bodies that are regarded as fossils that originated at the solar system's inception, and they could provide scientists with some primordial material to investigate. That is why comets coming from the distant Oort cloud, rare guests to the inner solar system and therefore untouched by the sun, present original materials that formed the solar system 4.6 billion years ago. There may be other reasons, however, for why this particular comet was chosen for exploration almost 12 years ago. Dr. Michael Salla, on his exopolitics.org blog site, wrote that there was a media frenzy back on September 29th from a UFO sightings daily post titled, NASA records radio signals coming from Comet 67P for over 20 years. The author, Scott Waring, cited an anonymous ESA whistleblower who wrote in an email that the mystery signal was detected 20 years ago by NASA and this was the true reason behind the Rosetta mission. It appears now, however, that the confirmation is official. Sala notes that the ESA's surprise announcement hints that the significance of the landing may go well beyond the historic first of humanity landing a probe on a comet. According to the statement from the ESA, Rosetta's Plasma Consortium, or RPC, has uncovered a mysterious song that Comet 67P is singing into space. The comet seems to be emitting a song in the form of oscillations in the magnetic field in the comet's environment. It is being sung at the 40 to 50 millihertz range, far below human hearing. To make the music audible to the human ear, the frequencies have been increased in the following recording. This is an edited sample that claims to be signals coming from the planet. Karl-Heinz Glasmayer, head of space physics and sensorics at Braunschweig Technical University in Germany, was quoted on the ESA blog site as being, quote-unquote, surprised. This is exciting because it is completely new to us. We did not expect this, and we are still working to understand the physics of what is happening, said Glasmayer. The blog page noted that the scientists think it must be produced in some way by the activity of the comet as it releases neutral particles into space where they become electrically charged due to a process called ionization. But the precise physical mechanism behind the oscillations remains a mystery. However, Sala appears to question this as he closes his article by writing the following. If the mystery signal today confirmed by the ESA was detected 20 years ago and led to the Rosetta mission, then it stands to reason that NASA and the ESA believed that the signal was more than a random composition by nature. If extraterrestrials are wanting to announce themselves to a disbelieving world, transmitting a beautiful song from a remote comet does appear to be an elegant form of first contact. Another source also raises questions about the true nature of this particular mission in commenting on a series of photos allegedly leaked of the comet, which seem to show unnatural and potentially constructed objects upon the surface of the comet. The following comes from a YouTube report published on August the 11th from a group identifying itself as Secure Team 10.
Do not think for one moment that a space agency would suddenly decide to spend billions of dollars to build and send a spacecraft on a 12-year journey to simply take some close-up images of a randomly picked out comet floating through space. I hope that your viewers and connections, if not your viewers themselves, are not as naive as the government hopes that you are. There is always a reason for money like this to be spent on such a mission, and that reason, I can assure you, was not to take pictures of a rogue space rock. The images attached to this email are two of the original images captured by the Rosetta spacecraft on its approach to Comet 67P. By saying that they are original, I clarify this to mean that they are undoctored versions of the images already shown publicly or soon to be released publicly. These images depict the true nature of the mission and the real reason the space agencies across the world made it a priority to venture out and partake in a military reconnaissance mission around this object. Comet 67P is not a comet. Some 20 years ago, the NASA Space Agency began detecting radio bursts from an unknown origin out in space. It would later be known that these bursts had likely come from the direction of the now named Comet 67P. Once the technology progressed, It was confirmed that not only were these signals coming directly from the comet itself, but that the comet had seemed to change trajectory at will, which to any scientist is an obvious impossibility for any rock confined to the physics of space. It was at this time that the NASA Space Agency decided to plan out a mission to send a military-backed reconnaissance mission to the object, in hopes of discovering its true nature. Because of its nature and secrecy, the American Space Agency made a deal with the European government insiders to publicly tout the mission as a search to simply get a close-up of one of the millions of comets flying through space. It was the perfect cover and allowed governments to go about getting the mission off the ground without the need to hide its launch. There is always a true reason for certain space launches. Why do you think that soon after the 1947 Roswell crash, just a few years later, NASA was on the ball to get ready for a space launch to the moon? There is always a reason. The images attached to this email are undoctored and depict the true inner workings of Comet 67P, which as it turns out is something completely different from a comet and is only being disguised as such. As for who is disguising it and why, I cannot answer. All I can tell you is that whatever this thing is, it does show signs on its outside of machine-like parts and unnatural terrain. I trust that you will do your best to pass these images on to the proper sources. Whatever this object is, it did not ask to be found or scrutinized, and it appears for good reason.
Only now is it starting to be revealed that at least several, but very likely many, indigenous tribes around the world have belief systems of life and civilizations beyond Earth. One of the prophecies of the Hopi tribe is that young people with long hair will begin to connect to various indigenous tribes in order to learn more about the ancient wisdom attached to messages from our galactic families. As always, I recommend each listener to use his or her own discernment and not accept anything I share as truth unless it resonates with you to do so. It is up to each listener to use what is shared to help guide one in following one's own investigation, to help understand and discover what is true for oneself. In a story very loosely connected to disclosure, but also to technology, there is a story posted on RT on November the 9th, reporting that the European Space Agency, or ESA again, has proven that its project to 3D print a base on the moon is possible. In the latest video, the agency shows how 3D printing robots may be used to build the base using lunar material. The ESA started investigation of the lunar base possibility in 2013, working alongside its industrial and architectural partners. The creation of the reliable semi-spherical structures on the surface of the moon could be fulfilled within the next 40 years, and 90% of the materials needed would be derived from the moon itself. Just as with the earlier financial story, the fact that the ESA says in the next 40 years may be a number intentionally released to avoid creating too much hype too early. The article goes on to add that according to Scott Hovland, in a statement released by the ESA's spaceflight team, 3D printing offers a potential means of facilitating lunar settlement with reduced logistics from Earth. The new possibilities this work opens up can then be considered by international space agencies as part of the current development of a common exploration strategy. The current plans call for the planned settlement to be located near the South Pole of the Moon, where there would be almost constant solar power available. 3D printing is very rapidly becoming the future now. The article notes that in September, the International Space Station received a high-tech 3D printing device that would allow for the creation of tools and supplies for astronauts. For many listeners, they will already be familiar with the reports, the stories, and the images indicating that there are already structures upon the surface of the moon. This news, although new for some listeners, may merely be yet another attempt to softly disclose to the world the changes starting to occur not only on Earth, but also beyond. As of airtime this week, I do not have the latest updates on the tweet email storm campaign underway right now by the Paradigm Research Group. CVN attempted in weeks past to reach out to Stephen Bassett without any response, and also sent a request today to an individual assisting in this campaign. Unfortunately, still there was no response returned in time. CVN hopes to have more updated information on this campaign for next week. In the meantime, the links that were posted last week and the week before, with more information about the campaign to push for formal hearings on the disclosure of our galactic families from within the corridors of power in Washington, continue. Those links will appear in the show's summary for those wishing to send tweets or emails. Looking at tech news now for the week, we start by looking at what is becoming an increasingly important issue for many people who are wanting to serve humanity and the planet using the internet. This is the issue of security and privacy. RT is reporting this week a new partnership between Mozilla Corporation and Tor that is aiming to help address the issue of security online. Many may recognize Mozilla as the company behind the internet browser Firefox, and Tor as the popular software tool which aims to protect online anonymity. According to the article, the internet browser Mozilla is teaming up with Tor to give internet users greater security online. The new Polaris project is designed to combat internet censorship and make the NSA's intrusion a thing of the past. Edward Snowden's revelations concerning the extent of the National Security Agency's spying on the general public hit computer and internet enthusiasts hard. A poll conducted by Harris Poll on behalf of the internet company Mozilla last month found that 3/4 of those surveyed feel that their personal information on the web is less secure than it was 1 year ago. Tor is an acronym for the Onion Router, and the article describes how Tor helps protect internet users by bouncing its way randomly around servers, which are manned by volunteers around the globe. This makes it significantly more difficult for surveillance companies to keep track of one's online movements. Tor has had so much success that one top-secret NSA document described it as being the king of high-secure, low-latency internet anonymity, which was reported by London's Guardian in October of 2013. The agency admits that they're at a loss at how to try and decode the identity of a user in response to a specific request. One feature that the Firefox browser has now implemented is a Forget button, which allows users to erase their browsing history for the last 5 minutes or up to the last 24 hours and apparently leave no trace. The partnership, being called Polaris, is, according to the article, designed to allow us to collaborate more effectively, more explicitly, and more directly to bring more privacy features into our products, the browser stated on its website. We want to accelerate pragmatic and user-focused advances in privacy technology for the web, giving users more control, awareness, and protection in their web experiences. We want to advance the state-of-the-art in privacy features with a specific focus on bringing them to more mainstream audiences. The article also adds that Mozilla has teamed up with the Center for Democracy and Technology, CDT, which, like Tor, is a non-profit organization. The CDT's aim is to champion freedom of expression while also supporting laws, corporate policies, and technology tools that give users greater privacy. They are also trying to ensure that tougher regulations are implemented to control government surveillance. CDT looks forward to working with Mozilla on the Polaris program and advising on issues like combating internet censorship and protecting online anonymity which are vital to promoting free expression online, said Justin Brookman of the CDT in an article which was published by Mozilla's website. Mozilla and Tor are currently testing yet another security feature that they hope will be released in the near future. In 2013, according to the article, they launched a new download that allows users to identify who is tracking their internet movements. Dubbed Lightbeam, the free Firefox extension enables users to see which third-party companies are monitoring their online presence, a move that Mozilla states will illuminate the inner workings of the web. According to a separate article from RT on Lightbeam, this article notes that with the download in place, Lightbeam creates a visual representation of all the third parties that are active on the websites you visit. Typically, that would include advertisers or other companies looking to sell your data for marketing purposes. Mozilla is also encouraging Lightbeam users to crowdsource their data in order to generate a big picture view of how tracking works on the internet, potentially singling out which companies are the most active in their monitoring. The visualization grows with every site you visit and every request made from your browser, Mozilla said in its online description of Lightbeam. In addition to the graph view, you can also see your data in a clock view to examine connections over a 24-hour period, or in a list view to drill down into individual sites. Considering the software's ability to access such detailed information, there's already concern that the program may jeopardize the privacy of users willing to share and upload the data it tracks. Mozilla, however, says there's no need to worry. Lightbeam does not record IP addresses, and everything users decide to share will be done anonymously. It can also be easily uninstalled. Mozilla has already upgraded its Firefox browser after learning the NSA was exploiting deficiencies in the browser to uncover people using the anonymity-protecting Tor software and gain access to their data. According to Mark Sermon, Mozilla's executive director, it's a stake in the ground, meaning that it is a concrete step forward in terms of letting people know the ways they are being tracked. On a related note, there are apparently several online search engines that listeners may wish to explore if they are looking for internet privacy. Two sources found by CVN include DuckDuckGo and XQuick. So there are options that appear to be becoming increasingly more available that are designed to shut down those who seek to spy and surveil upon those whom security agencies may consider threatening, even if it is only an average everyday citizen exerting his or her right to access information and share it in privacy. In the show summary for this story, listeners can see all articles related to this story and also the links for information about DuckDuckGo and XQuick, as well as the Lightbeam feature offered by Mozilla. On a related issue, the issue of internet neutrality, U.S. President Obama has recently taken a stand. Although net neutrality does not necessarily protect one's privacy in surfing, it does protect one's right to have access to any websites one chooses that are available on the internet. The following speech made by Obama was posted on the Upworthy.com website.
Ever since the internet was created, it's been organized around basic principles of openness, fairness, and freedom. There are no gatekeepers deciding which sites you get to access. There are no toll roads on the information superhighway. This set of principles, the idea of net neutrality, has unleashed the power of the internet and given innovators the chance to thrive. Abandoning these principles would threaten to end the internet as we know it. That's why I'm laying out a plan to keep the internet free and open. And that's why I'm urging the Federal Communications Commission to do everything they can to protect net neutrality for everyone. They should make it clear that whether you use a computer, phone, or tablet, internet providers have a legal obligation not to block or limit your access to a website. Cable companies can't decide which online stores you can shop at or which streaming services you can use. And they can't let any company pay for priority over its competitors. To put these protections in place, I'm asking the FCC to reclassify Internet service under Title II of a law known as the Telecommunications Act. In plain English, I'm asking them to recognize that for most Americans, the Internet has become an essential part of everyday communication and everyday life. The FCC is an independent agency, and ultimately this decision is theirs alone. But the public has already commented nearly 4 million times asking the FCC to make sure that consumers, not the cable company, gets to decide which sites they use. Americans are making their voices heard and standing up for the principles that make the Internet a powerful force for change. As long as I'm president, that's what I'll be fighting for too.
Although there are many who are choosing to abandon Obama because of choices that appear to be negative on one level, I am keeping in mind the game of chess. In the past, as I have played chess, I have made moves that on one level may not be understood by others, but may be important in the overall strategy that I may be using. Given the opponents that have been actively seeking to discredit Obama publicly, this, to me, is an indication that he is at least attempting to root out the influences of the global cabal, and, in passing certain legislation, may have been attempting to get people angry enough that they would finally get engaged to help him expose and bring down the global cabal and its system. Obama could not do it completely on his own, and as captain of the corporate ship America, he may fully know and understand that he may have to go down with that ship as long as he can see to it that as many get into the lifeboats as possible. For now, making a stand to support net neutrality may be a statement that he is working to help ensure that people have access to the Internet, perhaps to a more secure Internet, and it is perhaps he is hoping that people will take advantage of this to continue their work and research in helping to expose the global cabal on all levels. In health news, for those who have been following the alternative health channels for years, this story may resonate with you. Information has been becoming increasingly more available, showing the benefits of Eastern-based healing modalities such as acupuncture, acupressure, and more. These focus on the Eastern philosophy that the body is comprised of energetic meridians, and that properly activating these meridians can facilitate healing in any part of the body. As well, there is increasing evidence to suggest the benefits of light therapy as a modality of healing. An article by April McCarthy, posted on November 5th on the healersjournal.com website, presents information incorporating the benefits of combining both modalities. According to this article, low-level lasers, cold laser therapy, or light-emitting diodes have been used now for decades to enhance healing and function at the cellular level. The beauty is that very low-cost laser pointers in electronic stores can work as effectively as units worth thousands of dollars. With a targeted and specific wavelength, lasers will work better than most medications to reduce pain, ease tension in muscles, increase mobility in joints, and even heal wounds. It seems, according to the article, that a 5 milliwatt 635 nanometer laser available at many electronic stores has more than sufficient power to stimulate and initiate healing at the cellular level. In the words of dermatologic researcher Dr. Andrzej Slominski, life on Earth since inception has depended on a constant source of energy from the burning gases of our sun. There is an ancient relationship between the visible and near-visible spectrum of electromagnetic radiation and the biomolecules of life. Laser therapies are medical treatments that use focused light. Unlike most light sources, it is tuned to very specific wavelengths. It is non-toxic and non-invasive therapy that uses this light energy to repair and regenerate cells in the body. It has been proven to reduce and even eliminate the need for medication, improve the outcomes for conditions treated, and increase the recovery rates of affected tissues. Low-intensity laser therapy has anti-inflammatory, immune-modulating, and tissue regenerative properties. When placed in contact with the skin, the laser enhances the body's natural healing process. Laser therapy is widely used in the medical and cosmetic fields. It is non-destructive to the injured tissue and promotes many positive functions such as collagen formation, cellular metabolism, angiogenesis, lymphatic flow, and energy production. CVN recently interviewed Carl Ryberg of Stockholm, who provides light-oriented therapy for healing. Various colors, meaning their particular frequencies, will have different effects upon the body. As far as possible risks, the article notes that due to the low power density and the properties of the wavelength used, the true low-level therapy lasers are only capable of delivering a physiological dose of therapy. One of the most important aspects of a physiological dose of therapy is that it is safe. It is safe no matter what the condition or pathology is, no matter what medications the patient is on, no matter what the patient may be allergic to, no matter what, a true LLLT unit will do no harm. There appears to be an abundance of scientific study to back up the claims of laser and light-oriented therapies. According to the U.S. National Library of Medicine and the National Institute of Health, there are over 6,200 supporting studies. How does the process work? According to the article, biological light receptors in living tissue, termed chromophores, have peak activation at wavelengths between 600 nanometers and 720 nanometers. The most commonly used wavelengths to activate these chromophores are from 630 nanometers to 635 nanometers. This is because even though different chromophores have peak activation somewhere between 600 and 720 nm, each chromophore can still be activated within a wider wavelength spectrum. 635 nm falls within the wavelength spectrum of all biological chromophores in man and animals. This means there is no need to utilize multiple colors of lasers to activate the different chromophores in the body. Once the light energy passes through the layers of skin and reaches the target area, it is absorbed and interacts with the light-sensitive elements in the cell. This process can be compared to photosynthesis in plants. Sunlight is absorbed by plants, which is then converted to usable energy so that the plant can grow. When cells absorb light energy, it initiates a series of events in the cell that is theorized to eventually result in normalizing damaged or injured tissue, a reduction in pain, inflammation, edema, and an overall reduction in healing time by increasing intracellular metabolism. There are apparently three specific and unique ways a 635 nm wavelength laser can function on the body. 1. Within the cell, the signal is transduced and amplified by a photon acceptor. These photobiological effects are mediated through a secondary biochemical reaction, photosignal transduction cascade, or intracellular signaling, which amplifies the biological response. 2. The ionizing effects of LLLT allow photon acceptors to accept an electron. This has the potential to triple the oxygen-carrying capacity of blood instantly. 3. When photon energy breaks a chemical bond, changes occur in the allosteric proteins in cell membranes. Changes in intracellular calcium alter the concentrations of cyclic nucleotides, causing an increase in DNA, RNA, and protein synthesis, which stimulate mitosis and cellular proliferation. If this is a modality of healing that resonates with you, CVN gently advises you to view this article link, which will be in the show summary for this story, for more information. It is always advised to do your own research, as not every modality of healing will work for every individual. And in this week's final words, there may very well be a few people who choose to take offense at what I'm going to share this week. It is tough to let go of what we have been conditioned to think historically, and it is also hard to accept when one thinks or feels that one or a departed family member is being attacked. Without understanding or being able to see the bigger picture, the response is understandable. It is my prayer that perhaps those who may initially feel anger will pause and reflect on the real issue behind the comments and not to see the comments themselves as any kind of attack. We are here at this time to bring issues out into the open for healing, and healing this long-standing issue may be critical in truly honoring those who died, those who are remaining and being neglected, and those family members who have to deal with the consequences. It has been said that in the U.S., perhaps even in many countries around the world, once the country is perceived to be under some kind of attack, it doesn't matter which political party the leader comes from. The country has historically rallied behind the leader and perhaps behind the flag. The same can be said for the heroic men and women who have fought, killed, been injured, or even died in their own service defending this illusion known as democracy. Those who may not fully understand the bigger picture may perceive this as an attempt to discredit those who have served and died. This is not the intention at all. Having just passed yet another day of remembrance for those who gave their lives in service, it seems many North Americans still have not wholly come to understand exactly what it is that is being commemorated. Yes, we are remembering the individuals and their courage, and many families that hold on to this grief may still hold on to the energies of anger, fear, and perhaps even revenge for this alleged enemy that stole their loved one away. Perhaps little consideration was given to the fact that the soldiers who have been presented to us as the enemy are merely young people from lower and middle class families in their countries who have been taught similar messages about Westerners. Thus, we have innocent young people who are being forced to kill innocent others, following an alleged chain of command that has been set at the highest levels by the international banking cabal that has been profiting from and consolidating their power with the fear that has been propagated by unlawful wars that no one has consented to. Let me be clear on this point. Some have consented to serve and protect, but I highly suspect that if the soldiers knew who and what they were serving and protecting, many might have a different position. Am I justified in making this comment? I believe I am, based on the increasing number of videos appearing on the internet of soldiers who are confessing the activities they have participated in and how they are now feeling about those activities. There is an alarming increase in the number of soldier suicides in at least a few countries, which is not being addressed. We see that governments that command their soldiers to legally murder others in their name later abandon these same soldiers to deal with their post-traumatic stress disorders and leave them homeless as their traumas rip their lives and families apart. Longtime listeners may remember this speech by U.S. soldier Mike Prisner.
We are told we are fighting terrorists. The real terrorist was me, and the real terrorism is this occupation. Racism within the military has long been an important tool to justify the destruction and occupation of another country. It's long been used to justify the killing, subjugation, and torture of another people. Racism is a vital weapon employed by this government. It is a more important weapon than a rifle, a tank, a bomber, or a battleship. It is more destructive than an artillery shell, or a bunker buster, or a Tomahawk missile. While those weapons are created and owned by this government, they are harmless without people willing to use them. Those who send us to war do not have to pull a trigger or lob a mortar round. They do not have to fight the war, they merely have to sell the war. They need a public who is willing to send their soldiers into harm's way. They need soldiers who are willing to kill and be killed without question. They can spend millions on a single bomb, but that bomb only becomes a weapon when the ranks in the military are willing to follow orders to use it. They can send every last soldier anywhere on Earth, but there will only be a war if soldiers are willing to fight. And the ruling class, the billionaires who profit from human suffering, care only about expanding their wealth, controlling the world economy. Understand that their power lies only in their ability to convince us that war, oppression, and exploitation is in our interest. They understand that their wealth is dependent on their ability to convince the working class to die to control the market of another country. And convincing us to kill and die is based on their ability to make us think that we are somehow superior. Soldiers, sailors, Marines, airmen have nothing to gain from this occupation. The vast majority of people living in the U.S. have nothing to gain from this occupation. In fact, not only do we have nothing to gain, but we suffer more because of it. We lose limbs, endure trauma, and give our lives. Our families have to watch flag-draped coffins roar into the earth. Millions in this country without health care, jobs, or access to education must watch this government squander over $450 million a day on this occupation. Poor and working people in this country are sent to kill poor and working people in another country to make the rich richer. And without racism, soldiers would realize that they have more in common with the Iraqi people than they do with the billionaires who send us to war.
At the same time, the money that could have been spent to help heal soldiers and their families is now being spent on drone technologies, more than likely because governments are trying to hide the fact that soldiers are committing suicide over the truth of their involvement, or that soldiers are finally starting to stand up and speak against their chains of command and are refusing to follow unlawful orders to support a Zionist or global banking cabal agenda. One could argue the benefit of drones because it means that soldiers no longer have to do the physical killing, except those who just have to push a button from a remote location. There may be less trauma to deal with as well, which may be true to a certain extent. The fact remains, however, that the root source or root cause of all the wars and crimes against humanity have been covered up and hidden from the people of the world, and that humans worldwide have been deceived into fighting wars that justify the right of the global banking elite to continue stealing our money and our loved ones while also destroying our planet for profit, power, and greed. Those who know me and what I stand for will very likely know that I am not sharing this to put down the efforts of courageous men and women in our past. They served honorably, but perhaps without the full knowledge and awareness of what was truly going on. The families of those who served and died in the past can take comfort themselves that the service performed by these souls was done honorably, but simply without this full knowledge and truth. The argument is getting harder now. With so many soldiers speaking out, there really is no excuse for any individual of lower or middle class to sign up for military service. However, ultimately, it comes down to a soul-level contract, and perhaps there are souls that need to sign up for one of two reasons at this time. One is perhaps so that they can finish up their soul-level contract on Earth and return back home. And the other reason may be that they will become part of the awakened military that will serve to truly honor their oaths and help to remove the corrupted leadership from various governments around the world. Take, for example, a report last March by Murray Brewster appearing on the globalnews.ca website. According to this article, federal lawyers say Ottawa has no special obligation to those who fought wars on behalf of Canada, and that it's unfair to bind the Harper government to promises made nearly a century ago by another prime minister. So, it seems okay for a government to expect people to kill and die to preserve its power and financial interests, but not for the same government to support those who were killed or injured in that service. As I have mentioned before, it is not our place to judge one's choice to serve or to not serve in military or police forces that serve the agenda of the global banking cabal or the Zionist interests. Nor is it our place to judge a leader or governing body, as challenging as this may be. There is a reason for it all at this time, and the rest of us are being called to hold a higher vision while anchoring energies of true peace, compassion, forgiveness, and love that can help these soldiers to transform the environment in which they have chosen to serve. This past Remembrance Day, as it is called in Canada, can perhaps now be transformed into something higher. Perhaps it is no longer about merely remembering those who died serving an unlawful agenda that contributed to the enslavement of humans worldwide. Perhaps those who served in the past, looking down upon us, would want that more soldiers, and perhaps more humans in general, remember who they are and choose to remember or rejoin the human and planetary collective in oneness. So Remembrance Day becomes Remembering Who You Are Day, or remembering or becoming a member again of the collective of oneness in service to humanity, our planet, but also our benevolent galactic family. Neil Donald Walsh has written that there are only two energies at the core of the human experience, love and fear. Love grants freedom, fear takes it away. Love invites full expression, fear punishes it. Love invites you always to break the bonds of ignorance. Time, is it not, that we take steps towards breaking the bonds of ignorance and step into the light of the truth of what we have created and of what we are claiming to want for our future? One of my favorite musical artists, Jewel, in her song Life Uncommon, sings, "And lend your voices always to sounds of freedom. No longer lend your strength to that which you wish to be free from. Fill your lives with love and bravery, and you shall lead a life uncommon." I gently offer that it is time to let go of the Remembrance Day that has enslaved us to the systems of fear and debt, and embrace the Remembrance Day that I feel best honors those who have departed before us and all who are still serving in all ways. We no longer need to give energy to manifesting emotions based on events of the past, when these energies can be best put to service in truly creating the world that the soldiers of yesteryear believed they were fighting and dying for. To truly honor their memory and service, perhaps it is up to us to create that world that they believed they were creating. The good news is that this is no longer a life uncommon. It is, in fact, a life that is becoming more and more common, as hundreds of thousands have already begun to awaken and serve in their own uniquely different, yet equally beautiful ways, and more awaken with each passing day. I send gratitude and love to members of all militaries worldwide who have begun to remember who they are and who are now finding ways to honorably serve those whom they are truly there to protect, the people of the world and the children of the world, and not those who seek to take this world away from the children and from us. I remember, and I see you. Create a wonderful week until our next moment of now. So that is the unfolding consciousness news around the world this week. Cosmic Vision News is a part of the Enlight radio group of programs. Links to stories used in this broadcast are published in the show summary on the blog at cosmicvisionnews.com, on the CVN Facebook page, also on Twitter, Google+, YouTube, Ello, and LinkedIn. Thank you for sharing your time with me. I'm Jeffrey West, reminding you gently that you no longer need to lend your strength to that which you wish to be free from. Fill your life with love and bravery, and you shall lead a life uncommon. Until our next moment of now, stay grounded in love. Hold the vision of light and peace in your heart. Remember who you are, and keep your eyes to the skies. Disclosures unfolding all around you. Namaste.